Good evening, it's 7 o'clock, Special Plan Commission meeting, Tuesday, August 29th. Call to order. Roll call.
Mr. Piles? Mr. Frederick? Here. Ms. Besler? Here. Mr. Caprillion? Here. Councilmember O'Reilly? Here. Mayor Teestrake?
Here.
Ms. Veith is not with us, but we do have a quorum.
Thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Approval of agenda. By Mr. Frederick. Second by Mr. Caprillion. Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Identify potential conflicts of interest. Please be advised per City Policy 3.340 that any member of the body shall declare a conflict if they have an interest, financial or otherwise, direct or indirect, or engage in a business or transaction or professional activity, or incur an obligation of any nature that is in conflict with the proper discharge of the body's official duties. Any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, move on to item 5. Citizens' comments. Any citizens wish to comment this evening? Citizens comment twice. Third time citizen comment. We'll go on to item number 6, public hearing regarding the proposed boundary project plan and creation of tax incremental district number 14, City of Marshfield, Wisconsin, presented Josh Miller, planner.
Is this on? All right. So I was talking to the mayor before the meeting, and there was a suggestion by one of the members to give a little bit more background on what a TIF is. And I think we can do that as part of the public hearing. I would do it normally probably as part of the resolution discussion, but this will give you a little more background and to you and to the public. So what is a tax incremental district? Basically, it's a tool that is one of the few tools of economic development that the state gives municipalities. And what that means is a city can identify an area of land and estimate that there will be projected growth. And when they create the district, they set a base value for that district. So they look at all the assessed values, both the land and improvements of the proposed district, and then they basically establish that as the base value. All of the money that goes, or all the taxes that are collected for every property in the city essentially go to 4 taxing jurisdictions, and that includes the city, the county, the technical school, and the school district. So those are all your 4 taxing entities. Once you establish a TIF district, and any increment that's generated from that district, all the tax dollars that are generated from that district then go to the city to help pay for project costs. And some of the project costs we'll talk about tonight. But so essentially that's a real nuts and bolts of it. It can be more complex than that, but basically it's a tool where the city can basically capture all the taxes that are generated in a certain area and use the money to help pay down debt for project costs. And project costs are limited by statute and are limited by what's identified in your project plan. So we'll go over some more of that as we go, but that's the kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And if there are questions as we go, feel free to ask anytime. But the purpose of the public hearing is to hear about the tax incremental district number 14. And the reason it's number 14 is because there have been 13 districts before that. The city does not have 13 active districts. Some of them have closed in the past because they paid off their debt. But right now, I think there's 6 active districts, 7 active districts. And so just, they go numerically. And so what we're proposing to do is to create a district, and I'll show you the location of it, that is in the project plan. Because part of your charge tonight is to recommend the boundaries of the district. So the location of the district is in the northwest corner of the city, near Veterans Parkway and McMillan. It's kind of at that corner near really the new Quick Trip area and surrounding area. That's the proposed district area. So we're in both Wood County and in Marathon County. This is the first TIF district that the city has that's actually in Marathon County. The boundaries, as you can see here on the map, are bounded in red. And the proposed parcels that are within the district are hatched. So we're looking at just a handful. I think it's a little over 32 acres in total, and that includes rights of way and real property, so parcels that are here. And what we're proposing to do is create a mixed-use TIF district, which means at least 50% of the district has to be comprised of two of the three following uses: residential, commercial, and industrial. That doesn't mean that it has to be that today, but it means that the land is suitable for two of those three uses. 50% of the land is suitable for at least two of those three uses. So moving on with the mapping, I think that's the easiest part to look at. The other part of the TIF district is cities can make expenditures within a half mile of the boundary of the TIF district. So if it's going to be something that can benefit the TIF, like some infrastructure or some utility improvements, things like that, that actually have a direct benefit to the TIF district, they can make expenditures for that. Now, they don't get to collect the increment within the half mile. The increment generated is only collected within that TIF district, but the expenditures can be made beyond that. And those expenditures should be identified in the project plan. And we do have a couple of those. As far as the existing uses go, most of it is commercial already, with some vacant land and rights of way are included in the district. The proposed future uses, so this is where we look at what is suitable for the two of the three uses. We have commercial, which we would propose for the existing, obviously the Quick Trip, the hotel, Merrillwood, and then there's some vacant properties to the north of Quick Trip, and then to the east of Marlwood is a vacant, about a 5.5 acre piece of land, and then east of that even further is some existing residential. So we have at least two of the three made up uses consisting of existing residential, newly platted residential, and commercial. And what's the difference between residential and newly platted residential? Well, the state allows cities to use a 35% of a mixed-use TIF district for what's considered newly platted residential, meaning that it's residential and it would be platted, meeting the statutory definition of a plat. And so right here, we're looking at the 5.6 acre piece as possible residential, newly platted residential. It doesn't have to necessarily be newly platted, but it allows it to be newly platted. And you can see here, most of it is zoned commercial. The city allowed, this is the zoning. So if there is residential in that 5.5 acre piece, there's a likelihood that it would have to be rezoned to either a multifamily or some type of residential use. And we have identified that in the project plan as required by state. If you're going to be propose changes to the code or plan, you should identify that in the project plan, and we've done that. These are just the parcels. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is that, some of the property is in Marathon County. Another piece of this is part of the property within the district was annexed within the last 3 years. And so when we look at the council resolution, we'll have to identify that that property has been annexed within the last 3 years. You have to note that the city either has a cooperative boundary agreement with the adjacent municipality, which we do with the town of McMillan, or there's an agreement to pay at least 5 years of lost taxes, which there is. So, or the city has agreed to make that payment. So, just a couple other things that you look at. There's a lot of statutory provisions. The process to create a TIF starts with the Joint Review Board. So we convene the Joint Review Board, which is made up of those 4 taxing entities. There's a representative from the city, from the technical school, the county, and the school district. And then there's also a public member at large. So there's 5 people on that board, and they ultimately get to decide whether or not the district gets to be created, because they're ultimately the responsible members of the taxing jurisdiction. So they can say, you know what, this is in the best interest. We understand that this is going to help, the city's economy grow, and eventually our tax base is going to grow because of it. Or they could deny it at the very end. We did have a meeting with them last week. They seem supportive. They're knowledgeable folks and understand what TIF is used for. And ultimately, the whole reason you create a TIF district, or the standard by state, is it's called a but-for test, meaning that but for the TIF district, the development would not happen. So essentially, we're saying that, there's a number of vacant pieces here, and the vacant pieces really have not developed ever. They've been vacant, in the history of Marshfield. And so obviously there needs, there's probably some need to spur on some development. And so that's what the city can do, is say, you know what, we can make some project costs, we can provide some infrastructure, we can provide some cash incentives, we can provide other assistance to make these properties develop. And that's what this plan is intended to do. So some of the project costs, I guess we probably get into that a little bit. I'll back up just a second. So another threshold that the state requires or limits the municipality is you cannot have more than 12% of your equalized value in existing increments of other TIF districts and the base value of the district you're creating. So you look at the city's total equalized value as of January 1, 2023, we're at almost $2.1 billion as the equalized value in the city. No more than 12% of that can be existing increments in the TIF and the base value that we're proposing. So the existing increment right now of all of our TIF districts, of all the city's TIF districts, is just over $120 million. The city has capacity of over 250 million. So the proposed base value is about, when you equalize it out, it's about $4.9 billion. So we're well under that threshold, meaning that we pass the test and the state does allow us to continue on with the creation of the district. And some municipalities are well over the 12%. That just means that their TIF districts have continued to grow. Their current increments exceed that, and they're not able to create any new TIF districts until something closes or they're given some more relief in that. And the state's always talking about whether or not to change that, but that remains to be seen. So I've already touched on the annexation piece. There was, it is one piece that is now, there used to be two parcels, that is now one parcel. And I'll just touch on the project costs here that are proposed. And again, these are estimates. We don't have a crystal ball. You think about project costs that were developed even 5 years ago would have been way off given the inflation that we've experienced. These are $23 right now. And some of the projects may happen, this year, next year, may not happen for 15 years. The district has an expenditure period of 15 years from the date of the creation. The life of the TIF district can only last 20 years. So the reason that there's a difference between that is the state wants the city or municipality to be able to recoup its costs after the end of the expenditure period. So if there's 15 years go by and there's still some debt, you can still make payments on that debt, but you have 5 years to recoup any additional debt that the district has incurred. So right now we've got, the area that's identified as newly platted, that's really where the main, the main infrastructure effort would go in this district. And the estimated, to put that cul-de-sac in was around $675,000. And that includes connecting the sanitary and storm sewer from outside the district. Because of the way the gravity flows, you couldn't do it connecting to Adams Avenue right there. It would come across towards Veterans Parkway. So that part of the district cost would be outside the district. But the rest of it mainly would be, and then connecting it to Adams Avenue. And then the other main cost would be cash grants to developers to help incentivize some development, either for the residential or for the commercial properties, or for redevelopment. If some of the projects or the sites there could use some sprucing up or improvements there, the city could make cash grants. But those do require a development agreement. The city can't just see, you see we have a dollar value in here under the cash grant category. That doesn't mean the city gets a $2 million check that they can start writing out checks to the developers. There has to be a development agreement approved by the Common Council and then ultimately given to the Joint Review Board. So they will be able to track kind of what the city does with the monies and the project costs in this district. So all told, the total estimates of, again, estimates, none of these are not to exceed numbers. These are ballpark, but about $3.3 million of potential expenditures. And if you go through, and this is the map showing the proposed project costs. So you can see one thing you'll note in this map, it looks like the cul-de-sac is being shortened, and that would be what we would look to propose. So to reduce the cul-de-sac, so you're reducing the cost of infrastructure, which would help the city out. So you're really just extending it to get to that property. And then some of the other project costs I've identified, just the sanitary and storm sewer, and then possibly easements or other land acquisition if necessary to serve that area. And again, that's all within the half mile. And then you'll note that in the appendix, there is some additional financial estimates. So some development assumptions. we're looking at, if you look at the table on page 23 of the, well, it's actually up on the screen. We looked at potential residential development build out and then also potential commercial development build out of the sites that are within the TIF. And again, estimates based on what we think the values could be. But we're looking at, in the next 20 years, we show it probably more aggressively than that in the next 11 years, about 14.7 potential new estimated assessed value of the district for the city to spend 3.1 million. And if you look at the financials, it certainly cash flows. Looking at let's see here, the last page on page 27, this is the kind of the cash flow projections. And you can just you can see what, if the city takes out a state trust fund loan to pay for the infrastructure, and then over the course of, 15 years, they're paying out incentives, plus administration costs, because there are other associated costs with creating the district and then maintaining it and audits and so on. It is negative for a little bit. And oftentimes what municipalities will do is they'll do a fund, they'll do an advance from either the general fund or some other healthier fund. And then the city can recoup interest costs from the TIF for that advance. So it's it looks negative pretty heavily early on, but that's pretty common for TIF districts because usually you have to make some kind of expenditure. And what the city's been going with lately and trying to do, and most municipalities do this, are what's called a pay-as-you-go. So usually, it used to be historically a municipality would say, okay, if you build a $5 million building, we'll give you, let's say, $100,000 once you open your building, and here's a check. Well, nowadays it's more common to say, okay, once we'll give you, $10,000 over 5 years after you pay your taxes each year, to make sure that the city's going to get their value, they're going to get their paid first, and then they're going to be able to incentivize that developer to kind of help them move things forward. So that's where the city's kind of been going with agreements. That's the direction, and that's pretty common. And I think developers are really understand that. And that actually, with the interest rates now, it's a bigger benefit to the city because they don't have to borrow that money up front, have a higher interest charge, and the developer can take on that risk in most cases. So that's about all I have. I know that's a lot for a public hearing, but that pretty much covers it. I just want to make one note. I did have one slight change in this plan, and it's pretty minor, but it was just under the future uses, I had the percentages off, and this little area in green here, that was red on the project plan that you have. That's actually right of way. So we modified the percentages. It didn't change anything else in the plan, but that map has been updated. So I guess with that, I'll let you guys hold your hearing, and then we can address questions in the resolution.
Perfect. Public hearing is now open. Anybody would like to speak? Public hearing? Public hearing is now open. Seeing none, public hearing is closed. Do you have any questions for Josh? Yes. We'll go with Mike, then we'll go with Franklin.
Hi, Josh.
Hey.
I'm wondering if you can provide a little clarification. You had mentioned that the city is able to capture all the taxes when a TIF district, that does end at some point, right?
Correct. Yeah, the life of the TIF is 20 years at most. Well, I shouldn't say that. So the standard life of the TIF district is 20 years. There are extensions, but yes, the city can capture that the revenue of all the taxing jurisdictions for the life of the TIF. So one of the things that we can do at the end of the life of the TIF is you can do an affordable housing extension, and then you do one more year. You can capture one more year of increment and use that money for. You can also do what's called a technical school extension, and there may be other things in 20 years that we haven't thought of now.
Sure.
And then also they can close early too, and which the taxing jurisdictions obviously like. If all the debt is paid, there's no more project costs to do. You can close early, and the city's looking to close, has closed early, other TIF districts, and would look to close other ones early, I think.
Okay. And one other point I was curious about, being that this one is encompassing on Marathon County, and you mentioned the 5-year tax coverage, how does that work with taxes with us? I'm not real sure how that breakdown works.
Yeah, so what happens is, so the property was annexed, I believe, in 21. And so it would start from that date, and it's the taxes that are paid to the township as of the date that it's annexed. So basically, you'd pay 5 years of lost taxes at the rate that it was taxed at when it was annexed. So I don't know what that dollar amount is. It's pretty minimal because it was vacant land. And so, it's pretty minimal.
Franklin?
Just for clarification, the debt, is the city is in debt, or the developers are in debt, or both?
Well, I mean, presumably
Developers are
both.
borrowing from the city's borrowing to help the developers. What is the debt?
So,
I didn't quite catch that.
yeah, good question. In this instance, the city would likely borrow for the infrastructure up front in order to access the property in this case. So there would be some debt incurred there. But in order to do that, there'd have to be some assurances by the developer that they're going to develop a certain number of units or meet a certain assessed value over time. So there would be some assurances there. If there is in the other parts, the vacant parts or this residential part, any other developer incentive. So if the city's going to give them like a cash incentive for their development project because they need some additional assistance, more than likely that would be a pay as you go. So it would be, okay, you're going to put up I think we had $1.5 million for one of the resident or the commercial sites. So if they agree to build that and produce a structure of $1.5 million new increment, the city could provide some offset or some cash, but paid out over time, kind of a reimbursement for taxes. But we're not allowed to do tax abatement in Wisconsin, so it's kind of a workaround, but it's legal.
Okay.
I have a question, more of an understanding now. When a developer develops a project or whatever, or a house or whatever he does, are they paying taxes on that once it's completed?
So there's a little bit of a lag. So there's usually a construction year, an evaluation year, and then a revenue year. So it's the year you pay so if you build a house today and you finish it today, you're not going to pay taxes in December on it. You won't pay taxes until the following December based on the value that you create on January 1 of 2024. So right now, there's, as you can see, there was, Quick Trip got built this year. So the one thing that we're doing right now this year is to kind of create the district before October 1st. And if you create the district before October 1st, all the values that you start with, your base value, go back to January 1 of 2023. So most of Quick Trip was constructed in 2023. So there hasn't been a lot of value on that property. At the end of this year, it's going to be a full valuation. So they won't get taxed for that this year, but they'll get taxed for it next year. That increment is going to start off, give this district a healthy start with some increment already generated. So that was one of the appeals by the city to get this going right now because it made sense to capture that increment. And we explained, many communities do that. And it's basically because of that increment already generated, that helps pay for the district and also is good justification for creating it.
And if I can add to that, when Josh was talking about pay-as-you-go, that lag time comes into play because the developer might be thinking, hey, we're building houses or we're building a commercial structure, when do we start collecting? It probably will be 2 years out. I mean, the scenario you're talking about has to do with a tax payment, usually in January of 2025 with Quick Trip. So that's figured in. We don't usually remit money back unless we're collecting it under pay-as-you-go.
And two other comments about the tax. As you know, if you're paying attention to what's going on with the local reevaluation and the Board of Review, that's happening this week. And so we don't have 2023 numbers yet. That book has not closed, so we're waiting still. So the numbers that you see here are 2022 numbers. We don't anticipate they're going to spike up a lot to have a higher base value, but just wanted to note that. And then the other thing is we use a 73% equalization ratio in the project plan because that's what it was in 2022. That number is going to go to 100% presumably. And so the tax rate will shift down, but the values will go up. Wow. So there's some trade-offs. So it's kind of we have to work with the best available numbers that we have at the moment. And the way the timing works, you have a small window to hit everything perfectly in even with that, because of the late open book board of review, we can't get the numbers until we finalize it, and that's perfectly fine, because we have a lot of gap in that 12%.
On page 17 of the document, it's the parcel list.
Yep.
So this is currently what's assessed, and these are all the lots that are considered developable, yeah?
No, those are all the lots in the district.
All the lots in the district, okay. So that's why the Quick Trip numbers are quite low on here.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And again, these are 2022 values. A Quick Trip, there was some earthwork, and I think the pond and some other things were done, but it was pretty minimal.
Yeah.
By January 1.
So which of these lots is it? Maybe it's listed somewhere else. I'm not seeing it, but okay, is it on page 20 then that the ones that, no? Which ones are developable on this list?
So we'd have to look at it, we'd have to compare them, and so the proposed use, yeah, it's not easy to find on here, but there's there's two in Marathon County, so the non-Quick Trip ones, the bottom two, I would say, are developable. There's another one, I don't know the size. The other one on McMillan Street, that's vacant. There's two that Merriwood owns. One's vacant, and then the other one's used kind of as a yard area.
Yeah.
And then south of that is the land. It's land behind Fleet Farm. It's 5.6 acres. It's pretty well hidden, but that acreage. So there's probably, I would say.
So the Mills property one, that's the residential area we see with that cul-de-sac.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's probably 15 acres of all of it that are probably greenfield development. The rest of it, like you said, there might be some areas where you could update or rehabilitate.
Yeah. So there might be a structure there, but it could still, we could still incentivize some further development on it. Okay. Aside from the Quick Trip that's already happened, do we have any relatively concrete interest on the part of any developers to make any movements on some of these properties?
I think the housing we're looking at pretty strongly, and then there's always inquiries, and you want to, I think you want to be in position to be able to make things happen quickly, and so those properties are pretty ripe for development. Some of them have had for sale signs on them at different times, but they're once Quick Trip happens, it seems like a pretty opportune location for other development to happen. So that was part of it. So the other component of this is you can amend boundaries. And so there's other areas that I think strategically bode well for this location. So we could extend it different directions to possibly capture additional residential in the future or additional commercial. So I think there's possibly you can amend up to 4 times.
Mm-hmm. So how much of the costs of the TIF are, I mean, we got creation fees, some annual audits. I'm trying to identify like how much cost will be incurred that, I mean, it does, like you mentioned, it does help you have the Quick Trip starting in taxable next year.
Yep.
But how much of the costs are going to be more closely tied to when development occurs?
I would say other than like the administration, we are conservative. So you look at these administration, DOR fees, statutory fees, and then the creation, that's, probably 300,000, 250 to 300,000, or those are just ongoing admin costs of TIF districts.
Mm-hmm.
Generally what you see. Now, if there's no activity, they're a little less than that, but you still have to do the audits. You still have to do the Department of Revenue fees and stuff like that. But beyond that, anything else, if the city's going to put in infrastructure, I'm certain that they're going to have some development agreement in place before they spend money to bid it out and construct it.
Yeah, okay, good.
Any other questions or comments for Josh?
Is there anything tied to the Quick Trip that's already done? Is it pretty much we just get to collect? I mean, do we have to do anything in additional besides just encompass them in this district?
Nope, basically, nope, there's nothing that they have to do or we have to do. In a blighted TIF, you do have to notify property owners. That is not done in industrial or a mixed-use TIF. So there's not really, you know, I've seen quick trips in other communities that have been in TIFs and they don't usually ask for much. So they're not usually, so yeah, it's kind of it was an opportunity. The timing was good.
Get to snatch some revenue.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much.
So, just if I could, so the resolution that you have before you,
Yes.
resolution PC 2023-01 is to consider impossible action on the resolution of the Plan Commission recommending the proposed boundary. So you're recommending the proposed boundary and approving the proposed project plan for tax incremental district number 14. And ultimately that will go to council for approval. But the council could make changes to that. This is your version of it, and probably won't change much unless they have some hardships over something. But more than likely, this is the document that'll go forward, and that is scheduled, I believe, for September 25th or 26th. And then shortly thereafter, that we'd be scheduling, or the Joint Review Board would be looking to convene and vote on it. So. By the end of September, this district is projected to be created, and then it would go to the Department of Revenue for certification. So your charge tonight is just really approving the boundaries and recommending the boundaries and approving the project plan.
So we have yep.
Yeah, maybe Josh already said it, but if we didn't make that timeline, we wouldn't be able to go back to January 1 as far as the increment. Then we wouldn't capture the quick trip improvements. So that timeline is important, and it's been laid out pretty clearly that we need to make it.
Alderman O'Reilly, motions?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve as presented.
Second.
John Caprillion, second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
Roll call.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Piles?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Yes.
Ms. Besler?
Aye.
Mr. Caprillion?
Aye.
Councilmember O'Reilly? Yes. Mayor Teestrake?
Yes.
Motion is approved.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for all the information, Josh. And who would like to adjourn the meeting? Alderman Frederick and Alderman Basler. We are now adjourned. Thank you all. And thank you.